And we're live. Woo! My voice is not live. And we're live. It is Monday, November 25th, the year of our Lord 2024. It is 8 o'clock a.m. in Washington, D.C. The sun is shining. The birds are chirping. It's going to be a great fucking day. And you are watching Dog Shirt TV, which is, as you know, or as you may have been informed, a fucking revolution in morning television. And I was the subject of a revolution last night. I was lying in bed, minding my own business, sleeping, and something with fangs bit my foot. Now, it was not a snake, at least I don't think so, but it definitely had two fangs. There are two holes in my foot, and my foot, the area around the fang marks has swelled. So the fangs are a little bit too close together to be Dracula. And so I assume it must be some kind of arachnid, like a spider or something. It itches like hell, and my foot is, all swollen around the thing. But I'm the kind of guy, people, who looks at the bright side. And so what is the bright side of waking up in the morning with a gnarly fang mark bite on your foot and having to imagine what the monster is that put it there? And of course, the answer is that it makes for great foot pics to send to Rick Grenell, which turns out to be important this morning because Rick Grenell is under consideration, according to estimable news organizations all, to be Donald Trump's special envoy to, you guessed it, Ukraine, to end the conflict. Now, Rick Grenell is, as you all know, my favorite of the wildly inappropriate Trump people for all positions. He and I have a good relationship. I send him pictures of my feet on social media. I don't do it anymore because he's on Twitter and I'm not on Twitter. But I urge you all this morning, if you are still on Twitter, send a foot pic to Rick Grenell for me, and maybe draw in the little fang marks. We're all sending foot pics to Rick Grenell. It's important because he's going to be our national representative to end the Ukraine conflict. And I believe from the bottom of my heart that God sent the fanged monster to my bed last night to remind us that it's important to send foot pics to Rick Grenell. I have no idea what's on the show this morning. I am told that the estimable Sam Moyn may show up around the bottom of the hour, quarter of, to defend his entirely scurrilous attack on me in the New York Times the other day, which I will savage and, feast on his flesh, kind of like the monster in my bed feasted on my flesh. But I don't know. And so if you have something you want to talk about, join me. I don't know of anybody else who's joining the show this morning, but you never know. People may just pop up. All right. I still don't have a great deal to say about Pam Bondi, save that I wouldn't vote to confirm her. But I am aware that a lot of the Justice Department people are kind of breathing sighs of relief because it could be worse, which is kind of the slogan of a lot of agencies with a lot of, non-Pete Hegseth type nominees. Um, uh, if you're here live and you've got an issue on your mind, just pop in to discuss. Um, we've got a bunch of health nominees: CDC, FDA. I don't have a lot to say about any of them. They seem like pretty anodyne Mar-a-Lago types. Um, and I'm really not all that qualified to talk about them anyway. We have a Romanian presidential election, and the very far right fascist candidate who came out of nowhere and campaigned only on TikTok has won the first round. This is provoking a fair bit of NATO anxiety. I gotta say, a quick glance at the uh, polling numbers or the electoral tally numbers do not worry me, especially because he only got 23% of the vote. That means that in a runoff against a sort of anodyne center left candidate, he presumably will not surge between 23% and 50%, but you never know. So keep an eye on Romania for that second round. Also, another important thing about Romania, the president is not an especially powerful position. So what we're really watching for is the parliamentary elections, which I think are about a week out, and then there's a second round of this presidential stuff. Romania is important, not because for a couple reasons. So the first is that it's an uh, Eastern NATO ally. It's been a stalwart supporter of Ukraine. So it's important both for certain strategic reasons, but also just because, the sort of march of far right candidates is ongoing in all of these democratic countries, and we need to, keep an eye on it and, um, make sure that it everywhere it raises its head, it's a concern, and we got to think about it. So, eyes on Romania, um, eyes on Rick Grenell, thoughts on Ukraine. What else is going on? I slept a lot this weekend. Last week was took a lot out of me, and I ended up spending a fair bit of time just asleep this weekend, and that felt good. I'm rearing to go this Monday morning. Um, what else we got? Let's look at the New York Times. See what's going on in the world other than Rick Grenell and Romania. Trump could upset the electric car sales, upend electric car sales. Yes. So this is important because there is a large tax break, tax credit that I think it's like $7,500 or something that goes to you when you buy an electric car. And this has definitely increased electric car sales. I don't actually believe that Trump will do this, and the reason is named Elon Musk. And I think, Elon Musk's business interests are a very bad reason um, to make policy of any kind. On the other hand, in this context, Elon Musk's business interests happen to align with my sense of the public interest. And so that is I think, going to be a bit of a restraint on uh, uh, revoking this tax credit. I have just noticed So let's see what else. But that said, I haven't read the article, so who knows? It could be that there's much more to it than that. Hundreds more Nazca lines emerge in Peru's deserts. So drones and AI researchers have managed to double the number of mysterious geoglyphs in a matter of months. Who knew? I think the more geoglyphs we find in Peru, the better, because they're mysterious, they're apolitical, and they're not going to kill us. Excuse me. I usually try to mute myself before I sneeze, but occasionally it catches me by surprise. Not a lot else. An article about mascots. That's not that interesting. Let's see. The Washington Post reports that Musk and Ramaswamy are racing to build a Doge team for war with Washington. We knew that already. The most fulfilling jobs in America. There's data on this from the Washington Post with a picture of a bunch of nuns. A priest and a lumberjack and an entrepreneur walk in a bar. Which is happiest? It's definitely not the bartender. She's doing one of the jobs least likely to give you satisfaction in life. So, what are the happiest jobs? I don't know. It's not, okay. So self-employed, these are people who say, I'm proud to be working for my employer. Self-employed is number one, narcissist rule. Federal government employer, private nonprofit, local government, state government, and private for-profit is dead last. Okay, there you go. My workplace contributes to the community. Again, so local government employee is number one. Private nonprofit is number two. State government employee, number three. Self-employed, the narcissists, number four. Federal government employee here is down closer to the bottom. Self-employed, not incorporated is, and then private for profit again last. And a very similar pattern for the question, I contribute to the community through my work. So, moral of the story, people, don't work for private companies. You're going to hate yourself. Work for your local government or for, private nonprofits, and support your private nonprofits, particularly lawfare. And dress like a nun, because that's the picture that the Washington Post has chosen to represent job satisfaction. So there you go. All right. We are 15 minutes in, and nobody has jumped in to talk, which, this is, I don't have a lot of fears in life, guys, but, one of them is doing an hour of television with nobody jumping in to assist me. And, just vamping and making an ass of myself for an hour. It's, this is supposed to be a conversational show. And, if people don't make conversation out of it, well, then, first of all, I get lonely and it hurts my feelings. And secondly, I have to think of something to say kind of continuously for an hour. And I just want to show you what happens if I don't do that. I mean, John Cage is boring musically, and television in which people just sit there and stare at the camera, that's really boring. Maybe someday we should do a show of just, 1 hour of live non-communication. Maybe, maybe not. Not sure it's a good idea. So yeah, I did my first Get Ready With Me video the other day. And that was super fun. Big props to the estimable Catherine Pompilio for helping me do it, for giving me a briefing on what the key elements of a Get Ready With Me video are, including starting with, "Hi guys," which I wouldn't have thought to start with, because I would have thought to start with, "And we're live, it's such and such day," right? But Catherine told me that all good Get Ready With Me videos start with a cheerful, "Hi guys." And so we did that, and she, sort of walked me through what's in one of these. I've never actually watched one. I'm just kind of ambiently aware that they exist. And so we did it, and people seem to think it was very fun. And so we're going to do some more of them. And this camera, by the way, is very close to my face. Like it's a webcam of sorts. And so, we can really kind of get up with the bristly one day of growth, and we can do kind of close-ups on the eyebrows. And so we're gonna have some fun with that. Yeah, it's gonna be lit, as the kids say. And so if you have your favorite Get Ready With Me videos, either earnest ones or ones that are your favorites because they're self-mocking in some way, or because they're serious, send them my way. I want to really learn the form properly to do this right. And obviously, if you have favored makeup products for middle-aged guys who don't know anything about makeup, that's a really important component of this, because showing that talking authoritatively about subjects that I don't know anything about, by way of self-mockery, is like part of the idiom, I think. Like, and maybe using really cheap, terrible products and talking about them like they're, like a fine wine, something, the whole goal has to be sort of consistent. Like, the viewer should be like a little bit unaware of unsure whether I'm making fun of myself or whether I'm just an idiot. John Hogginson, good morning.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I am superb. The bite on my foot, and Rick Grenell being about to take over Ukraine policy really started my morning in the right fashion. How are you?
I've had a number of challenges recently. The most recent is discovering a steam leak in my basement last night. Uh,
Lovely.
Midweek last week, I'm perfectly fine, but I wrecked my bike because a car did something nasty. So, it's been challenging.
I'm
But,
sorry. Any basis to blame Rick Grenell for any of it?
that's a good
It
question.
it can be attenuated.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I have a very, very blurry video from a bystander who just happened to be wearing a body cam. And I guess that's a thing these days. And looking at the video, I can't say with any confidence that it's not Rick Grenell driving the 2016 Hyundai Sonata. I think so.
In Massachusetts, where he doesn't live.
I mean, it,
I mean, it
rental.
could have been.
I have no. I really cannot say any reason why it couldn't be him. I mean, he has
So,
access to air travel and other forms
and
of.
are you confident that the driver was male?
I would give it 70%. It's
So
very
there's
close.
So there's a 70% chance that there's a 150 million, 1 in 150 million chance that it's Rick Grenell.
Well, no, I mean, it could well be that Rick Grenell chose to put on a female disguise. I mean, I see no reason why that wouldn't happen.
I see. So even if the driver presents as female, we could still be dealing with a Rick Grenell situation.
Correct. It's possible.
Well, I suggest that you send him a picture of your feet, by way of just reminding him that he's responsible for your misfortunes bicycle wise, and certainly with respect to the steam room situation, that really has all the hallmarks of a Rick Grenell fail.
Well, I mostly popped up here because, well, first of all, your invitation and strong desire for anything at all, but also because there had been a couple of folks in the chat who had some things to say and sort of wondered whether you might take questions from the chat because there were some technical difficulties.
Well, I'm
But
happy to take questions from the chat, except for the part that it's very hard to look at the chat while talking and doing the show. Usually I do that while I look at the chat while, say, somebody else is talking. But when I'm the only one who's talking, it's very hard to look at the chat. So if you read me questions from the chat, I would be delighted to take questions from the chat.
that's sort of what I was thinking. So the first one, which was from Frank a while ago, was a question as to whether Biden might preemptively pardon Jack Smith and perhaps more importantly, his staff and other members of the current administration who might, be targets of a future administration.
Yeah, so this has been a subject of a fair bit of conversation. Paul Rosenzweig, my colleague, wrote a piece suggesting this in The Atlantic. There are good arguments for it, uh, starting with the you have a president who has, or a president elect who has promised to go after people, none of whom are genuinely suspected of having done anything wrong other than, uh, you know, do their jobs and thus politically upset him. And you can make a same argument for General Milley, right, and the people who might be uh, called back to active duty for purposes of political persecution. So I think there's a good argument for it. There are also arguments against it, and let's tick them off. One is that it does imply, when you pardon somebody, it does imply that there is something to pardon. And, if you hand Liz Cheney or Jack Smith a pardon, there's an implication that they did something that would make them vulnerable to a legitimate prosecution. And, that's actually, I was trying to think, imagine that you're Jack Smith and the president offers you a pardon. There's no such thing as not accepting it, but would that be a good thing for you, or would it come laced with enough insinuation that you actually wouldn't want it?
This is
And
vaguely reminiscent of the Mark Meadows Supreme Court question that they ducked, which I think with your position on that question.
yeah, I mean, so look, I think the answer is there are people who are differently situated from one another in this. If you're Liz Cheney, I suspect, or Mark Milley, I suspect there is a deep dishonor in accepting it, and you would probably not want it. But I don't know. I don't know either of them. But if you're some low-level person who worked for Jack Smith and you're trying to go on and, get a job at Arnold and Porter or something, and the you're going to have to spend the next 3 years of your life dealing with a completely meritless criminal investigation, the details of which and your emails are going to be leaked all over the place and that sort of thing. You may calculate it very differently. And so if I were the president, which I'm of course not, um, and or if the president asked me my advice, which he will not, I would say this is actually a question that knowing something about the user base would help. Um, who wants a pardon preemptively and who doesn't? Um, who would consider it needless noise that justifies some of the screaming, and who would consider it helpful in going on with their lives? I think that probably matters a lot in terms of whether you do it at all, whether you do it. Does Jack Smith welcome the opportunity to defend himself in public? He's not been allowed to speak about anything except in court filings. Does he look forward to this? Does he consider it a gross insult to his professional standing? How does he think about it, right?
I think also there's the question of what it means to establish a norm of preemptive pardons for what are arguably fairly characterized as political positions. If the MAGA side would then say, well, we should preemptively pardon all of our folks too the
Right.
next time around. And again, I don't know how we feel about that, especially in the context of the whole removal statute questions, but they're not as strong as a pardon for sure. So uh, I'm not sure what to think about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think and the other thing is if, like a lot of these things, it operates asymmetrically. Jack Smith has not, to my knowledge, committed any crimes, nor have, importantly, his staff. So if you launch, the argument for a preemptive pardon in that situation is you can save a lot of public servants who are not wealthy a lot of money and a lot of time. Now, if you tell me that when an administration goes out with a January 6th, that they're going to preemptively pardon all the Rudy Giuliani's and Jeff Clark's and right, like that's a whole different kettle of fish. It's formally exactly the same. But one is a grotesque norm violation compounding other norm violations, and the other, though formally exactly the same, is a arguably very justified thing. So my basic view is I would not oppose it. It does matter to me a lot what the individuals want. And my ideal would be, for the White House counsel's office to do a little bit of, it's dicey actually, because they shouldn't be in contact with, you're right, there's a contacts policy that forbids them from, calling the Justice Department. But like, this is an area where if there were a request to the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General to make a set of recommendations about whether there are ways that the president can be helpful in his final days. And, Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco could put together a list of people who would be receptive to this and a list of people who would like not to be pardoned. I think that might be a way to think about it. But I look, there's no good answer to this question. We don't we've never really confronted this problem
But
before.
let's say, Ben, we're going to be in a world where there are no good answers and many problems are sui generis. So we're going to need to learn to think about them in an effective way without a lot of
And
data.
that is why we have the Greek chorus chat on Dog Shirt Daily, and why John Hawkinson can press that button and say, hey, can I read some of the Greek chorus chat questions? And I can say, let's think about them out loud. By the way, if you have thoughts about the appropriate way to do this, or to think about it, shoot me an email, write a comment on Dog Shirt Daily, and let's keep this conversation going.
I did have another question related. I guess I don't know. These aren't from the chat. This is me now. But what's the strength of prosecutorial immunity in the federal system? Uh, oh, we have Professor Moyn. I'm going to disappear now.
I would say, just a quick answer to your question. The answer to that is that prosecutors are generally immune uh, for prosecution related to their prosecutorial decisions, and that is one of the arguments that certainly, if there were not a pardon and there were an effort to prosecute uh, Jack Smith or one of his colleagues, they would have strong immunity arguments. Sam Moyn,
Hey, how are
welcome to
you?
Dog Shirt TV.
Thanks. I missed the launching of this new one. I think I was last on your show with Scott.
Yeah, so Dog Shirt TV is the slogan is it's a fucking revolution in morning television. We're on live every morning from 8 to 9. We don't schedule guests, as you've seen. We just issue invitations. People
Amazing.
show up or not as they like. Sometimes there are long periods where, I just have to vamp.
Right.
And anytime you want to join me,
Great.
you don't need to tell me in advance. You can just show up, and we try to have good conversations with the audience, with people who drop in,
Amazing.
and it's an experiment.
Amazing. Well, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. I'm here to respond to. I want you to defend your scurrilous attack on me and Lawfare from Thursday or Friday or whenever it was. No, so all jokes aside, um, uh, I actually agree with your piece almost 100%, with the single caveat that I don't think lawfare is a good example of the point. And so let's start by having you just describe the thesis of the article, and describe the point that you made about us in it, and then I will sketch out my areas of agreement and my defense again of our integrity and honor, and why I actually don't think we're a good example of the point.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I don't think there's going to be much difference because at worst there was a passing moment of snark just for fun and, among friends. But no,
No, I am, just for the record, deeply unoffended, and
right.
I actually agree with the piece.
So, I've been watching this unfold like you for years, and in fact, I've posted similar thoughts on lawfare itself back in, if memory serves, most notably in the aftermath of the drop of Robert Mueller's report. But the focus of this article, which was solicited, I've been trying to sit this one out, honestly, is that, well, law's a tool and it serves whatever ends it's put to. And there was an attempt to make it serve a kind of militant democracy end, as we call it in the trade, which is like, how does democracy protect itself against its enemies? And can it use legal tools, including constitutional tools, to keep itself safe from this kind of threat? And I think, like, there have been people before who propose that the answer, sadly, is no. That exactly when you need, legal tools to keep your politics and political warfare within bounds, they're like not going to work. And because the moment you have a sufficiently popular threat, the only way to beat him, her, them is through a popularity contest. And I just think we have now, like, we've lived an experience of trying to master the threat through law and failing, and we should just learn the lessons. And I know you're open to, no recriminations, but definitely like not repeating the same behavior again.
Yeah. So no. So first of all, I agree with this essentially 100%, with a few caveats that I'll poke you about. Um, uh, the no recriminations point was not really about this. It was about, I don't want to spend my time talking about whether Kamala Harris should have thrown trans people over the side of the bus, or
Absolutely.
whether Nate Silver is an asshole, or whether it's all Merrick Garland's fault, right? Like, I don't that's actually not a useful set of
Totally
conversations. It was more a political point than a point about this. But here's my question about, so as you know, I wrote a piece that I said, look, I plan to spend this whole year watching Trump trials. I wasn't sure what the point, like what the relationship between this and democracy protection was, but was sure there was one, and I feel like a fool. That said, I was never one of the people who said we're going to keep him out of office by prosecuting him. I was more in the vein of wanting to chronicle it. It was a kind of a radical experiment. And there is this question, what do you have a criminal justice system for, if not the highest stakes cases? I mean, you can say, well, the criminal justice system is for punishing, racial minorities for nonviolent drug offenses, but that doesn't seem like a very satisfying, answer. So I guess my question is your view that federal prosecutors and state prosecutors shouldn't have bothered prosecuting what are pretty obvious crimes? Or is your view that we simply shouldn't have invested in that as a democracy protection mechanism? In other words, roll back the clock 4 years, and you're whispering in Merrick Garland's ear, is your advice, let's sit this out, take all the political heat you're going to take for being slow, and then some, just this is a political problem, not a legal problem? Or is it simply that people kind of got excited in the way they were burning Bob Mueller votive candles, and it's Mueller time and all of that garbage? Is it just that we invested stuff in it?
So I would have, counseled a kind of political confrontation with Trump. Not that that didn't happen, and of course we can Monday morning quarterback too. But there's finite energy and time, and a lot was invested in, let's call it, legal confrontation, and also creating an audience for it. Lawfare, I think, was a minor contribution to that. I think MSNBC much more major, like night after night. But I think the only place I would I think I begin in a different spot, because first, the law, I think, is a lot less clear. And I think we kind of
But
learned
not
through
about the
this.
classified documents
Well, no,
case.
okay, that's true, but
Right?
that one,
Not about.
I'm with you on that, and we'd have to get into like what Georgia law is being cited, but I even say in the op-ed, that one, like, it seemed like the the acts were of such turpitude, basically an attempted self-coup, that if we don't have federal law, prohibiting that, we should, we can't like gin up some obstruction charge, instead of having like a good enough law. But I guess I'm saying the law, taking all the cases in aggregate, like had a little bit less clarity than we would have wanted, especially to avoid the perception that it's just politics by other means. But then, since it's always going to be politics by other means, I mean, especially given selective prosecution, prosecutorial discretion, then we do have this bottom line issue, like what are the risks we're taking? Are there better alternatives? And that's where I whisper in Garland's ear. Um, there's a space for expert commentary on whatever goes on. I'm not, like, obviously I'm a law
Right.
professor, so, but that doesn't mean that even your site didn't get sucked in to something beyond just like reporting what was going on neutrally. It was part of a resistance strategy, and certainly if we did an analysis of our audience, we would find that, and that's fine. But I just maybe our only disagreement is about like the cultural function of the lawfare site in recent history, which is like a really small point to bicker about anyway.
Yeah, no, I actually don't want to bicker about it. I mean, we published what we published, and people are free to. I'm free to have my delusional understandings of what that amalgamated work product stands for, and you're free to have your delusional understanding. In your case, it's not delusional; it's malicious. But
Well,
like
except
we're
I
all
participated, so.
no. Look, we're all free to characterize our work or any body of work any way we want, and I'm not going to spend any time arguing with you about it. So here's my question about this. Let's say we start with the assumption that um that your priors here are right and that this should have been fought out in the political arena. Let's exempt the classified documents case for a minute,
Okay.
because it is post-presidential conduct. I think it was genuinely so egregious that couldn't they probably couldn't have avoided prosecuting it. But let's leave it aside, because it's not what most people are thinking about. They're thinking about the litigating Trump's conduct as president through the criminal process rather than or in addition to the political process. So whose decision is this? Right? So like somebody's got to make the decision. Moyn is right. MSNBC, maybe throw in lawfare if you want, there is wrong. Um, uh, is that like a Merrick Garland decision? Is it a Joe Biden decision? Or is it a Jack Smith decision, which actually seems like it came down to a Jack Smith decision, which strikes me as insane, by the way.
Yeah.
Who's the person who gets to make this decision? And there's an interesting question who the we is in that conversation, are going to litigate this in the public political space. Who gets to decide? Who's the decider of that?
I don't have a firm answer. I mean, I kind of default to the president just because he's the lead political official, and to the extent we think this is a political decision about law, but it's still a political decision that's about like what are the risks, what does prudence require, who's going to pay for the like incurring the risk. I think having some appointee, either at the level of the special counsel or at the level of the attorney general make the call seems like a mistake, when especially when we're talking about, prior presidents who might have a chance to come back. I mean, now in
But if
fairness,
that's
like,
right,
Biden could have pardoned Trump.
yeah, I was just going to go there. If that's right, and I think there's, as a structural constitutional matter, it is, why isn't the right criticism the criticism of Biden for not squashing this like a bug
Right,
on January 21st and
right,
saying, the model here, by the way, is Barack Obama saying about, the torture stuff, we're looking forward, not backward. He didn't issue any pardons, but he didn't
exactly.
need to because there were OLC opinions.
Right.
But Biden could have said, hey, I just beat this guy. We're not going to resolve this stuff in criminal court. We're going to resolve it in the political arena. I'm issuing a pardon to the president, the former president. Uh, and by the way, when the classified documents came around, you extend the pardon to that, right? You do it again. Why it seems to me to be a bit of a conflict of interest for the attorney general to say, include in your, we ask the attorney general to be apolitical on investigative and prosecutorial matters, whether that's a delusion itself, is it's but then we say, but on the biggest, most important cases, keep in mind that we don't want to be litigating these militant democracy cases, as law. We want to be treating them as politics. Why isn't this point really directed at Joe Biden?
Well, it is, but I just don't think it can end there. So, because he didn't, pardon his predecessor, and then I think we don't want to dodge our own responsibility, because then there are a lot of people in the absence of that pardon who had to make the political choice that Biden, if you like, shirked, and they made it. And the consequences were huge. And we also made it as citizens with our kind
Right.
of like attention, like where did we focus with our networks and so forth. So I'm with you. I mean, I think it would be but note, now we're heading in the direction of like functionally backing something like the Supreme Court's immunity decision, saying not only was it right, but like, it would be best for the health of the republic if we weren't constantly litigating presidencies after the fact.
No, but I think there's a real distinction between the Supreme Court creating a doctrine of not doing that and
Okay,
the president saying, I have this plenary authority to make things go away, and I am taking
totally.
he would have taken enormous political anger from
Sure.
his,
As Gerald
every,
Ford did, yeah.
as Gerald Ford did, every Mueller votive candle would have turned into a Biden effigy. And,
Yeah.
he, and to say that the president should be willing to do that on an ad hoc basis strikes me as a much more defensible position than that the Supreme Court should, make a rule for the ages that sets that
Yeah.
up. But let me ask you about the question that John Hawkinson and I were talking about before you showed up, which is whether, given that Trump promises to go after a bunch of people, the lesson that we didn't learn 4 years ago, we should learn as a prospective matter now, that Biden should come in, should on his way out the door, pardon the Mark Millies, pardon
Absolutely.
the Liz Cheneys, pardon the Jack Smiths, and most importantly, his staff. I have some hesitation about that, just on grounds that, these this implies some wrongdoing on their part. What do
Right.
you think about it? Does that sound sensible to you, or does it sound like, um, I don't know? Does it, it bothers me.
So on your first point, I know you didn't solicit a response. I just want to agree with you, and I would add that on this militant democracy theory, if it should happen that there's a criminal coming out of office who is enormously unpopular, well, that's a circumstance in which you can pursue that person criminally because it's like popular to do so, and might not risk that kind of counterproductive results that we did last time. Now, on the main question, I don't know. I haven't thought about it, but it sounds like if Joe Biden kind of said, "Look, I'm going to save us from the very thing you complained about." Um, and basically, let's talk about our policies and argue about those rather than who broke what law in the past. Um, and not to mention that, of course, Trump has promised, having been stung by our behavior in the past, to weaponize, as he says, the legal system. So it's not like there's not a credible threat. We could debate how far down that goes. Is like, should Tim Snyder be fleeing the country and so forth? But I do agree. I do think it's, I don't have a firm view, but it sounds to me like there are very good reasons to engage in some pardons of certain kinds of people and basically try to, in a sense, sell it to Trump himself as, like, in a way, as an apology, um, for the alleged weaponization of the legal system, and kind of say, let's mutually put a stop to that, and I'm going to help on my way out.
Interesting. I don't think Trump would take it as an apology.
No. Well, I wouldn't go so far as to frame. I don't think Trump deserves an apology, but it could be it could be presented like magnanimously, in
right,
light of what
and
we've learned.
interesting. So, what is your you now have a incoming administration that, is it fair for me to hypothesize, will be rife with criminality?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that is bad that's not illegal, and I feel like
Sure.
the main lesson of the Trump years is that one. Um, but yes, I think there's going to be a lot of unholy acts, uh, and ones I politically disagree with, which to me is far worse than saying they're illegal. But sure, there's going to be criminality in the mix always.
So is the gravamen of your point, in a forward-looking sense, that we should emphasize the political disagreement, and de-emphasize, so if there's criminality and routing money to the Trump organization, you should treat that as corruption, um, for political purposes, but not put your faith in investigations?
I would, because the fantasy that, like, presenting the facts as if they didn't need to be characterized and denounced, I think is what we've learned is not a great strategy. Um, Now, there might be exceptions. Like, again, I'm starting with the premise that usually the law is not very clear about what's
Right.
right and wrong, and we have to always justify our prosecution, uh, of some alleged violation as opposed to doing something else. So, but yeah, if there were some absolutely clear horrendous act, etc., that didn't fall now within, the
The immunity
constitutionally
stuff.
protected zone of the presidency, um, then okay. But otherwise, no. I think we should say, look, here's all the ethically, horrendous stuff that this administration is doing, and it's politically wrong, and you should vote the bastards out next time.
I
And then the
completely
hope is that the next 2 years are like something to weather, that we can weather and survive, with all the like terrible things that are going to happen during it. But then, like most recent presidents, his power is checked profoundly because of elections.
Right. So I agree with you almost completely. I think we would have some like, I think the only point of disagreement involves in the absence of presidential action 4 years ago, what advice we would give Merrick Garland. And
Right.
I think the I think the it is probably not a sustainable position to ignore clear or relatively clear crimes, particularly as you are prosecuting other
Sure.
people for them. That said, I do think the entire process of criminal accountability for January 6th and for the Trump administration was a great success with respect to the most minor people and the mid-level people, and a wild failure with respect to everyone else. And by the way, the bar discipline process has been a great success. And so it's interesting when you look at other metrics of legal accountability, how much more effective they have been. Giuliani is not practicing law anymore. He doesn't have an apartment in New York anymore. Like, the civil process has been pretty effective.
Right.
The, you know,
Absolutely.
right. And so, like, thinking about what the most effective, most targeted remedies, including legal remedies, are, rather than thinking about, can we lock them
Yeah.
up, it turns out that the the answers to those questions are very nuanced, and there's a lot to learn from there. So, um, I've been joking about flaying the skin from your body with an iron comb, like Rabbi Akiva. But the truth of the matter is, I actually agree with the body of the op-ed, and it's a pleasure to see your face.
Good to see you. I mean, I think there's a good faith argument that the trouble was that Garland acted too late rather than that he acted at all. And in some ways, maybe that tardiness set up the worst of all possible worlds, because then, like, there was a strategic delay that a lot of people could participate in, including the Supreme Court. But
I
then we're in
think
a
there's
counterfactual world. So
exactly. So, Sam, you have the link. We are here anytime you want to join,
sounds good.
any weekday. You're a great American, and it's great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too. All right, people. So we are going to be back tomorrow. We're going to have a show on Wednesday and Friday, but not on Thursday. Thanksgiving. We're going to respect that. Um, I don't have any planned guests. If you have requests of people that you would like to see on the show, please leave them in the in comments on um, the on the show page on Dogshirt Daily, and I will. I'm sure we'll get more fun picks. I will have more to say about Rick Grenell when if and when he gets named to this position. And if you guys have suggestions for, by the way, I loved the format of doing, having a representative person, John Hawkinson, or it could be on different days somebody else, read questions from the chat. That works much better than me trying to do it myself, because I'm capable of multitasking. It is very hard to read and speak at the same time. When you're reading one thing and speaking something else, that is actually stresses the limit of my multitasking. And so when I am up here alone and there's no co-host or no guest, it is very hard for me to read the chat while I'm talking. With that confession of inability, keep the faith, and we will see you tomorrow.